welcome to this week's episode of the Old Poetry Podcast. And today I am joined with former SAS trooper Mick Hawkes. Hi Mick, how you doing?
Yeah, thanks for the invite, much appreciated.
Yeah, good stuff, mate. It's a pleasure to have you on. Like I say, making the time to come on a podcast always means a lot. So yeah, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on.
Thanks, buddy.
Right, like I do with a lot of the podcast, is I kind of like to start at the very start, get a bit of a rough background of the kind of the guest for the followers, and then we'll move into a few stories and kind of how your career progressed, if that's okay. So where did you grow up, Nick?
Yeah, so I'm a bit of a mongrel. My aunt was, as we alluded to on another podcast, my old man was a screaming crapper. And unfortunately, I moved around quite a lot. So I went to 14 different schools, including a boarding school for a year up at Wilhelmshaven, which is north of Germany, on the Baltic. Flipping freezing during the winter up there. And we actually lived in an old SS naval base. So it was pretty grim, to say the least. But I found that I was good at football. So the moving around a bit was okay, because I was straight into the football teams. I could make friends pretty quickly, whereas my brother was a bit of a geek, to be honest, not very good at sport. And he struggled really. Yeah, no, it was enjoyable, but that's really where I got the taste for the military, and actually quite a bad taste, because as far as I remember, all the people that I was around were quite fat bastards, wearing blackberries, and that didn't really inspire me to join the military at all. And I was happy because, I had my ball under my arm, and away I went, playing football. But one thing I do remember is, every time the school did cross-country runs, I never finished a single cross-country run ever, purely because I wasn't interested. I just had the ball under me, and all I was interested in was playing football. And as I joined the military later on, I realised that I should have done a bit more running.
Well, the thing is about the military training, certainly back then, even when I came through in like the late 90s, the military training was like stick on a pair of boots or a pair of trainers and then run you to death, wasn't it? And I was chatting to this someone quite recently about this, and how that nowadays they've changed the military training so it's a bit more functional, and I think that's a really, really good thing, because instead of running you to death and people getting shin splints, because not everyone's a natural runner, are they?
No, I found I was, and the reason being is I joined Junior Parachute Regiment, 75 September 1975 intake. Went down around in barracks, and then suddenly found that we were on a 10-mile run, and it was with the old. Do you remember the old Plimsoll, black Plimsoll Jap slappers? And it was them and blue shorts and a red t-shirt, and away you went. Sprinting down the shockingly bad for your for your feet and your knees and everything else. But we did a 10-mile run, and it's the first time I actually run that far. And to my heart, I came second on this run. I was beaten by a guy who eventually we were in the cross country team together, bizarrely, and who was a really good runner. But then, and that's when I realised I should have taken more interest in the running side of it, because I found out I was a bit of a runner. But yeah, thoroughly enjoyed it.
Ah, yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. Yeah, I mean, like I say, the kind of the training areas as well down for junior para and that. Was that in Aldershot, or was it before Aldershot?
No, it wasn't. It was Aldershot, and I'm not that old.
No, it was, I don't know where it was before and what years it changed. Yeah. And I don't know. I know. Obviously, it changed in the 90s to Catterick, but I wasn't sure when it started in the shot, to be honest. Yeah.
Yeah. No, yeah. It was Browning Box. When they have the old big Ducati, Dakota outside the barracks, and then the lads who passed obviously walked up the hill, and they were in the either 2 or 3 para or 1 para if they were there. So it was down there. It was a bit of an eye opener. So I joined the cross country team, and we had a great time. Being juniors, it was a great way. It was a bit of a distraction from your normal training, and off you went. And anyway, there was a circuit of all these juniors, and so you were running against the same people, different units, but at their location, or they'd come down to Brown and Barracks, so we would. And our run obviously was around Hankley Common, but it was great. But you can imagine, so the junior parachute regiment cross country team, we came second, and we actually came second to the Army Catering Corps.
No way, really?
Yeah.
Keep that one to yourself.
Well, bizarrely, so we got the bus back, plastic trophy at the end of the season to say we were second, and the RSM was meeting us off a bus, and he had a big metal dustbin, with him, and he says, as you get off a bus, so what I want you to do is put your trophies in the bin, because if you think that coming second to the Armour and Catering Corps is an achievement, think again. So that was a bit of a shock to us, but quite funny, if that makes sense. Apart from your little trophy that you thought you'd earned, and it went. But that really got me into the mindset of a parachute regiment compared to other organisations. Very, very competitive, very single-minded, if that makes sense. And it was great up until I snapped my ankle. So I did junior para, joined the junior parachute gymnastic tour around the country. 1976, we did a sort of presentation type thing to, what was it, Manchester United and Ipswich at Portman Road in Ipswich. We then did the FA Cup final in 76, which was Southampton, Man United. So Man United absolutely hated us. Every time we did a demonstration in front of them, they lost 1-0. But then at the end of that, it was time to join Recruit Company, as they called it then. And we joined at week 5. I found P Company really hard because I was still a young lad, but tough going. And then we got to week 14 or 15, something like that, when we were just getting ready to go to, I think at the time they called it Advanced Wales, down at Sennybridge. Yeah, and but before we went down there for a jog, went for a jog round Hankley Common again. And while we were down, one of the instructors wanted to see how our para rolls were. Bearing in mind that none of us were para trained and didn't have a clue what a para roll was, apart from what these instructors were telling us what to do. And I jumped off a tank burn. It's about 8 feet high, 9 feet high, something like that. Jumped off and I just heard my ankle snap. Basically, obviously my para roll was pretty pants.
Not very good.
Landed on my right ankle and it snapped. So, but because an off the cuff type run, we had no ambulance with us. No, and we were quite a way out on Hankley Common. So the rest of the lads were pretty gutted about it because they had to carry me back all the way back to Browning Barracks. Went to the sick bay and then sent us straight up to the Cambridge Military Hospital. That was in Aldershot at the time. They manipulated the ankle to put it in place. Spent 2 weeks, while it was reset. They had a cast on it. They re-X-rayed it at the end. Found out that the ankle hadn't knitted properly, so pinned it. So the pin went in. 3 months later, I got called into the training major's office and barracks, and they had been advised by a medical doctor my parachuting career was going to be over before it even started.
Wow.
And they so they recommended joining Screaming Crap Out Regiment infantry unit. And unfortunately, at that time, because I suppose I'd done about 18 months really due recruit company. My mindset was it was parachute regiment or nothing. I left the military for 6 months, and then obviously realised that was a massive mistake going back to Civvy Street in Lincolnshire, of all places. So went down to the Army Recruiting Centre again, and they recommended, because my medical documents had this big red line across it, no parachuting. Yeah. They joined in a Army Commando unit. Which, and at the time it was either 2-9 Commando or 5-9 Commando, artillery or engineers. And because my father was attached to artillery units, artillery regiments predominantly in his signals career, I chose the artillery. Oh,
right, okay. Well, how do you feel about kind of sort of not continue? Well, there's nothing really you could do about it, really, if you bust your ankle, obviously. But obviously, coming on to you obviously passed the commando course, and then you went on and you did selection and stuff. So your ankle would have probably been strong enough, wouldn't it?
Yeah, right. So after I joined, probably about 4 years later, I was on summer. It was the period, and I got a phone call from who said, "Oh, Mick, there's a paracourse running, because obviously you can't join 2-2 if you can't parachute, obviously." But he said, "Yeah, there's a paracourse running. Are you interested?" And I went, "Yeah, absolutely. I'll go." He hadn't seen my documents, so he didn't know about the recommendation of no parachute. So I won it, and to be honest, once you've got in your ankle, your ankles actually becomes quite strong.
Yeah.
So I did the paracourse, went back up to Arbroath, got an almighty bollocking off the med centre there, which was a Marine Medical Centre, because we were attached to 4-5 Commando up in Arbroath. So they were a bit cheesed off, but I had the satisfaction of saying, "Listen, can you remove that red line to say I can't parachute?" And it was really so just before the Falklands campaign, I went for a run, and my ankle was flipped. So they basically went and tried to get the pin out. Sent me down to Woolwich, because we had a military hospital down at. So sent me down there to get the pin taken out. Couldn't get it out. They buried it deeper. So that told me that the ankle was actually going to be quite strong. But unfortunately for me, the ankle was quite raw, because it had been operated on twice now. And when you open up the same scar, it's quite difficult for it to re-knit again, if that makes sense. And with all the stuff you're doing, with the rubbing of the boots and everything else, it never really recovered fully. So when we did the Falklands campaign, and we did the tab across 4-5, I unfortunately had the old Northern Ireland patrol boots. And as you know, the old Northern Ireland patrol boots, as they used to be, were made of compressed cardboard, and you only had to look at them, and they were soaking wet. But they're the only boots I could wear, because the short leg mountain boots that all the boot necks had been issued, the top of the boot was in line with the pin in my ankle, and it was extremely uncomfortable. So I had to get rid of that. But the good thing about the boots was once they got wet instantly. You only had to look at them; they got wet. But at night time, out pretty quickly. Whereas these fancy boots that all the boot necks got issued, took a long time before they allowed the water in. But once they did get wet,
Yeah.
their feet were wet for a long time, and a lot of the boot neck down with trench foot. And there's me with these compressed cardboard flip flops, and they was fine. However, the ankle was starting to get really septic and gammy and everything else. By the time we got to Mount Cook, ready for the attacks, so we had obviously 3 power on Longdon, 4-2 were going to hit Harriet, and we were going to hit Two Sisters. Just to allude to the fact that although I'm in the artillery, I've never been on the guns in my life. I've always been at the other end, directing the gunfire. So I was attached to Yankee Company 4-5 Commando when we were sort of there. But when we were at Mount Kent, one of the lads said, "Mate, while you're here, you might as well nip down the RAP, the regimental aid post." I think the bootnecks called it something different. So I went down there, and unfortunately, and this is where I sussed out that the medical officers had something in for me, because he stripped off a boot, started looking at the ankle, and instantly said, "Listen, go back, get all your kit. You're getting flown off, or you're getting sent back to Uganda." And the people that were on the Uganda were people that had been shot and stuff like that. And me back with just a bit of a gammy ankle was not a chance in hell. And there's no way I was going to walk that way. And then suddenly, before all the get sent back. So I ignored him. So he strapped it up. Great. Refused his order of coming back. And a day later, we were dug in on Mount Kent, getting ready to do the attacks. We were adjusting artillery guns on the Two Sisters and everything else. He actually came up to our mission and give me a right bollocking and refusing an order and all that sort of malarkey. But thankfully, the battery commander just happened to be fairly close. And he literally told the medical officer, "Listen, Hawkes he's told you his answer. He's happy. We'll leave it. It's his decision, basically." So he allowed us to crack on, and I'm really glad he did. Because for me, going sick in a war zone is a bit of a no-no. If that makes sense. And
yeah, you kind of, not only that, you'd be conscious, but like I've always said it about going on tours and that, like it's what you join to do, and people, probably civilians, won't understand that aspect, and they'd be like, "Well, why would you want to do that?" But you're training for a specific role and then never getting to do it. So you're there, you're wanting to do it. And not only that, there's the element of not wanting to let the blokes down. That's always a biggie. And then also you open yourself up for a career's worth of slaggings, don't you? You know what I mean? So.
Well, that's it. We're a 4-man team attached to the bootnecks. So me going sick and leaving the other 3 to get on with it was a bit of a kick in the teeth for them, like. So so there was no way I was going to come off, and in a way I'm glad. However, at the end, I I ended up on the camera coming back, but so the 10-day sail back where everyone was on the ocean, all partying. I was sat in the medical hospital there on the ship, dug up, morphine and everything else getting pumped in, and antibiotics, because the ankle had gone really bad, like. So there was a downside to it, but I could live with that because I'm now, plenty of time to chill. But at the time, it was, you can't just wrap your hand in just because someone says that your ankle was a bit gammy. You'd got that, just pushing a wee bit further. But unfortunately, with the attacks on Two Sisters, bizarrely, we 4-5 Commando had lost their mortars tragically. So they just from Falklands, they were down at Otterburn, and they lost 3 people on a double feed,
Wow.
which was a bit of a blow. And then so I think that was about the September of 81. Then we had Norway, and then we had the Falklands. Now, unfortunately, there were two MFCs, the mortar fire control guys, fantastic blokes, really good lads. Andy Urin was who we worked with predominantly quite a lot. But him and his best mate, one of them was leading an ambush team, a patrol out, fighting patrol. And the other one, and you can imagine Mount Kent, you know, there's a lot of activity, different units, and the arcs that you're heading towards, you know, got shorter and shorter. So obviously you're going to get some blue on blues or friendly fire, as they call it. So you've got these two MFCs, one leading the mortars, 4 or 5 mortars, one in a fighting patrol, and they came across each other, and which was quite bizarre, because the mortars weren't supposed to be in that area, but the way it all sort of compounded itself was the two MFCs were talking to each other on the radio, and the one that was leading the mortars was at the front because he was obviously leading the mortars to a position, and his mate said, "Listen, just to be, bear in mind it's pitch black." He said, "Listen, just for confirmation, but are you tabbing at the moment, yomping? Are you moving at the moment, or are you static?" Unbeknown to the guy who was leading the mortars, that as he was walking on the radio, all the mortars behind him had taken the base plates off, and they were just taking a breather. And his reply was, "We're actually tabbing, or we're yomping," and that was a signal for the fighting patrol to open up on them. And unfortunately, they killed 5 of their own mortar guys.
Oh, wow.
Which was devastating. Bear in mind, just before the attacks as well, and you know specifically how important mortars are to a unit when they're about to go into battle. So to lose that element was pretty devastating. Unfortunately, we as artillery we got the backlash of it because they tried to use the artillery that we were supporting, like mortars, and unfortunately there was some occasion there they wanted to use artillery to take out a machine gun post, and literally you just had to say, "Bollocks, you know, go and take it out using your sections," because ultimately we were running short of ammunition, and you know there's only. And also, straight after Two Sisters, we were on to our next objective was going to be Sapper Hill. And Sapper Hill, after we'd actually tabbed over to Sapper Hill, would have been a fearsome firefight if they'd have stayed, because they were really well dug in. And the lead up to Sapper Hill was all open ground. So we would have taken quite a few casualties. Compound the fact that we were running out of artillery ammunition. Because we were using far too much, and you know at some point you just had to say enough's enough. Wind your necks in, guys. Just get on with it, and use your GPMGs and your 84
plans. The best laid plans do change anyway, but obviously, kind of blue on blues are quite rare, aren't they? But I mean, they do happen. They're probably worse than losing people because you're accepting of the fact you're going in for a conflict that not everyone is, certainly the folk, not everyone's going to come back, but to get it in a circumstance when a blue and blue, it's just not a nice thing, is it?
It isn't, and because you see it in just about every conflict. You know, you get the friendly fire blue on blues, as we call it, and it's just a fact of war. And some people that haven't been in a war zone don't understand that. It's not nice for the families to find out that their son or their daughter's actually been killed by their own side. No one likes to hear that. No one likes to hear news that their son's been killed anyway. But then compounded when they actually find out actually what actually happened. So it's not nice, but unfortunately, it's just the nature of the beast, if that makes sense. And away you go. but it was, I think the Falklands was the sort of push for me really to go on to special forces thereafter. But it took about another 4 years for me to get my act together, and I literally went on the winter course of 86. And if anybody remembers,
how old was you then? How old was you then? Sorry, when you went on the first selection?
86, so 25, 26, something like that. Which personally was right, because I was of a mentality in them days that when you join the SAS, you forsook a career, you know, the idea of having a career, and you were just going to go and enjoy going to different war zones, you know, different,
Yeah.
you know, getting stuck in. So, you know, so I was a sergeant in the 2-9 Commando when I went on selection. And when I passed it, that's your rank gone, you know, down to pick at the T and back up as a trooper, which I totally agree with. I think it is the right way to do it. The shaky boats don't do that. The SBS, you know, they keep their rank. But I always found it bizarre that you. So looking at the SBS, I'm not sure if it's changed now, but they used to keep their rank when they were. So you could have a young Marine who's passed SBS and been in the SBS now for what 4 or 5 years and probably got up to Lance Corporal, and then you get a sergeant who's just done SBS training, suddenly becomes here, which I found a bit strange. So
I think that may have changed. I could be wrong. I think that might have changed because I've got a couple of close friends that have, well, one's just recently done his 22 and left, and I'm pretty certain you go back to being like a
Marine.
Yeah.
And I think that was probably taken because of the backlash of you know, keeping your rank and everything else. And really, what they've done just copied the regiment's way of doing it, which actually is a pretty good way of doing it. Like, you know, in fact, because you're not losing out on money, you're getting paid more as a trooper than I was as a sergeant Royal Artillery, if that makes sense. So, but obviously your responsibility is sort of diminished. So I was in charge of TN, and the same as Billy Billingham. When Billy Billingham joined, you know, he was IC, so he was in charge of the boxing team in 2. And then suddenly, when he comes to 2-2, he's obviously in charge of the either the sugar or the tea. So it's a bit of a,
he did. Yeah, he did. Billy did say, he said it is a weird one in that, but they also, and you'll probably clarify this as well. He says, I mean, you get like what's called a shadow rank, don't you? So you kind of, if you went back to your unit, you'd pick up that rank again that you left. But he kind of said it were weird because in the Green Army, you kind of don't really have an input for the first year. You're just kind of in the background. But he said he'd not been in too long. And like I say, you might clarify the same sort of stuff. Is like, you might be on a briefing for a big op and they'll go, right, what do you think? And you might have only been in 5 minutes and your input counts as much as the next man that's maybe been in 20 years, you know?
Yeah, and it's, you know, that's the really good thing about it, because, you know, when you're all sat there as a squadron, you've got a massive amount of knowledge between everyone, you know. So, you know, I'd done a lot of time in the Royal, in the artillery. It's funny, we were on the anti-terrorist team time, and we had a day where we didn't plan anything. So one of the officers came up, one of the Ruperts, and said, Mick, you're artillery. Can we do a bit of artillery training tomorrow? So can you go and book the inventory, which is a simulation computer type equipment down at Lark Hill. The Invertron is normally booked up 2 years in advance. So as a young trooper, he no problems, boss, I'll sort it out. So jumped on the phone, and all of a sudden I'm a sergeant major talking to a major from the artillery, saying, listen, you know, Sergeant Major Hawkes here, B Squadron, we've got an operation plan coming up, and we really need to do a bit of artillery training. Is there any chance that we can come down tomorrow and to use the Invertron all day? oh, you know, and you can see the panic in the, you know, oh, and all they did was they just day and gave it to us. So we all steamed up, you know, in our t-shirts in the Range Rovers, as you do. And they kindly gave us the Imatron, or brought him. But what the major tried to do was he said, listen, I'll leave one of my to help you through. And I went, listen, don't bother. I'll do it myself. The SAS are not going to use the same procedures artillery as the forward observation troops would do in the Royal Artillery, because it's too long and too winded. Bracking for artillery is painfully slow. So we binned that idea. We said, listen, you know, let's go bold, let's go big or go home. So we would just give a really accurate 8-figure grid reference, an accurate direction to the target, and then we actually brought 6 rounds all in. So rather than 1 round, and I try and adjust that, we would bring 6 rounds down. So 1 round fire for effect. So 6 rounds would come down, and then we would make 1 bold correction. So if we were off, you'd make a really bold correction, left and right, front and back, you know, forward or back or whatever, and then stunk it with 5 rounds. Sorry, with you know, 6 rounds again, but you know, however how many rounds you have, depending on what the target was. And the guys, and the guys loved it because it was getting the job done quickly, which is how we would do it in warfare. We certainly wouldn't be thinking about, you know, 1 round adjustments before you got it right, and then do, you know, because that just takes too long. So we thank the major for his offer. We thinned that out. Crown did the training, and then, which was great, and then straight back the following day to pick the tea-ins back up and the sugar. Straight down to Pontralis to do the normal anti-terrorist stuff, like, you know. So it was good. You know, there is a lot of experience there, even though you're a trooper. There's a lot, and the other classic one is some of the young paras going up. You know, they've been in the mortars for many a year, and as you know, if you go to mobility troop, that's heavy weapons as well. And they become the forefront of all the mortar training, even though you've just literally dropped, because you've probably got more mortar experience than a lot of the other lads, because they probably don't come from a mortar ground. So yeah, it's a lot of experience.
Yeah, there's bound to be, isn't there? Like you say, this, and going back there, like you said about, but there's always discrepancies between training and actually doing it for the real. I mean, we try, and it's certainly in my year in TOPP, we tried to do the section attacks to the kind of as real as we could. I remember posting grenades in one end of a bunker when you've got machine gun firing 8-9 foot away in the other end of a bunker. But obviously, you then switch fire in the training kind of environment, whereas it'd probably be even a lot closer to that in wartime and on ops. You know what I mean? You do push the boundaries a little bit more on ops, don't you? So same sort of thing with that. You know, you haven't got time to piss around with certain things. You've just got to go, right, this is what we're doing. And like you say, it's quite a bold and ballsy move, but you have to take them kind of chances, don't you? So yeah, sorry, go on.
Sorry, yeah, just alluding to that, because I spent time running the CQB cell at Pontralis, and I always remember going down to Bridge with all the other Green Army units. So we would turn up with our jeans and t-shirts again in the Range Rover, and then you know what the army's like down at Bridge when they're going through all their weapon stuff. They had to, you know, hand over templates and templates of all for the. And literally, we just turned up with our notebook, cup of coffee. yeah, we've got, and they knew exactly that you know, all the stuff that we were going to be doing on the range was never going to conform to their safety standards. So they basically just, you know, forget it. Let the lads get on with it. Like, you know, you can't stick with the normal army rules when you're training for operations.
Yeah, it's kind of obviously I know nothing about the ins and outs of 2-2. I was never in, but I I kind of know a lot of guys, that a lot of my friends, and obviously it's quite of a natural progression for a parachute regiment shoulder to go down the kind of route of everything. So I've got a lot of mates that have done SF. Some are still serving now, and yeah, from what I've heard, and the odd bits that they tell me, and from stuff you now see on documentaries and stuff, because it's kind of open a lot more, isn't it? Now they're in the forefront, and I like it. I was going to come on to that and ask your opinion of that in a minute, but like they seem to be like you get away with wearing what you want, the whole beards, and I think that adds to the alliness about it, that the kind of mystique around it, because the normal army's confined to certain uniforms and shaving, and well, now there's beards apparently, but that sort of thing. Whereas Hereford and SBS and Special Forces, they cut around and they look pretty cool doing it, and I think that's half the battle as well. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, it was even better back in the day, if that happens. And even the era before me. So the era before me was obviously the Iranian embassy boys and all that sort of lot. So they were just leaving, and all that lot. They were in their final year as I joined the squadron. So we didn't really hang about with them, but they were the barber jacket guys, with the big chashes. So when I joined, I had the world's biggest Mexican bandito, and nobody tells you to shave it up. It's just when it becomes, because I had it on selection. When I was on selection, I just grew it and grew it and grew it until I thought I looked the part, bandito, and then it becomes part of the norm, and you don't have that bullshit of get your haircut and stuff like that. I mean, when I used to come back from doing the undercover stuff in Northern Ireland, my hair was actually practically on my shoulder, so it was actually quite long. And strutting about the camp when you're on leave, especially with your big gold earring in your ear, like the old pirate, you do get a few funny looks from people. But again, some of the lads are actually away on options, and they have to have long hair to fit in with the environment that they're going at.
Yeah.
So people understand that, and they give them leeway. Obviously, when you're doing the anti-terror, when you're back and doing the anti-terror green roll, you tend to screw the nut somewhat. But it's certainly nothing like the Green Army, which is a good thing. And I think you're right. That is all part and parcel of being Special Forces.
Well, nothing screams soldier than a crew cut and cleanly shaven in a weird kind of different environment than they should be, does it? And I remember doing the close protection and coming back through various airports, whether it be Jordan, whether it be Qatar or Dubai, and it'll be spot the security consultant, a bit different, but walking trousers, hiking boots, some sort of North Face fleece or something with a big beard, and you'd be like, yeah, he's definitely a security consultant, and it's the same sort of sketch. You can spot him a mile off, can't you? So what I want to do, mate, is take you a little bit back. Sorry, go on.
Yeah. So just talking about that. So when I was in Ireland, my hair was really blonde and quite long. So every time I used to fly back into Birmingham, Belfast to Birmingham, nearest airport, I got a hard time every time I came in by customs or immigration or whatever. And the reason being just the way I looked. And you could see the disappointment on their face, because they actually thought, drug runner, he looks a bit dodgy. Yeah, so I got pulled over every single time. And the disappointment on their faces when you used to go Army. And they'd look at it and go, really? You're in the Army? Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, and it's funny because when I first deployed, so when I first deployed to Northern undercover, you do about a month, settling in and but you get blown because that first month that you do, you're in and out of all the harder states, because you need to know where all the places are we going to. You've got to go to so that you know where they are. So So what you do is you grow your hair and everything else. And then at the end of it, once you've finished it, your orientation, you completely change your appearance. So what I did is, at the end of it, I flew back to the UK, had 2 weeks off or whatever. Flew back, and I forgot. I actually had you know, the nightstick asp. I had one of them in my backpack, and I totally forgot about it. And so as I was flying from Birmingham to Belfast, all the whistles went off, and they pulled us. So there's two policemen there escorting me to a room, pulled out the hat and said, "Listen, why, you know, this is illegal, blah blah blah." And I had to be really upfront. I said, "Listen, I'm in the SAS and I'm doing undercover work in Ireland," and you could just see their face drop. And it went, "Fair one, thanks for being honest." And
Off you go.
they put it in a brown envelope, gave it to the stewardess, and said, "Listen, pass it on to this lad when off the aircraft," if that makes sense. So that, you know, sometimes, you know, trying to be totally covert can get you in. Sometimes you just got to be honest.
Well, at least it worked. You know, the beard and the long hair, and that worked. If our UK police, you know, on the mainland are asking you if you kind of, and the customs and that, so it does work, doesn't it? And like, there is that stigma, though. Like you said, as soon as they found out you were legitimately, I mean, we've heard stories about people that go, "Oh yeah, such and such is in the SAS," and you're like, "Ah, yeah, of course he is, yeah." And I think people expect him to be like 6'8", built like barn doors and that. And like, I know a few that you could probably give a backhand to and knock them over, but soldiering wise and switched on wise, you know, they're kind of second to none. And there is that stigma, like you say, around the SS. And I remember walking into one of the scoff houses in Iraq in my private security flight suit, and some American soldiers come over and went, "Excuse me, do you mind? Are you guys SCS?" And like, obviously, I wish I could have turned around and gone, "Well, yeah," but I was like, "No, mate, we're not." No, and they're like, "Really? You wouldn't tell us if you were you?" And I was like, "No, genuinely not. We're a private security." But they wouldn't have it. They were like, "Well, okay." So, yeah, there is that stigma around it, isn't there? Which I kind of, that's what I love about it. I love it. You know what I mean?
The good thing about the thing why most SAS guys are actually quite small and quite wiry is just the selection process is really sort of geared towards big hefty. But we do get big hefty guys getting in. You know, make no bones about that. But it's more geared to the whippets, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, burger people that can carry a heavy blow and run up and down the hills and stuff like that. So the majority of people are actually quite small and wiry. You know, Billy Billingham, classic example, myself. But you do get big lads, you know, coming through. I remember doing a selection with a guy called Blackie Dixon, who was a bit of a legend, I suppose, in one para, and he was a huge. And when we went on selection, we were all in the cinema, sat next to each other, and the training major came in and said, "Listen, guys, what I want you to do is look left and right now, because the chances are is the person to your left, the person to your right won't be here in 4 weeks' time." And I looked to my right and then looked up at this big burly lad, Blackie Dixon, big boy. Anyway, so on the Friday, so this was on the Monday. On the Friday, we did the fan dance. Last time I saw Blackie Dixon, who was being carried off the fan, if that makes sense. Just to show that big hefty frame sometimes goes against you when he was trying to do a selection process, if that makes sense. So yeah, bizarre.
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, and like you say, quite rightly so as well. It's like that kind of explains it now why it suits you kind of. I don't know, as well as especially fit. Not like everyone passes selection that's skinny or smaller and wiry and everything else, but obviously, if you 6'8" and you know, built like a barn, you stand out in a surveillance scenario, don't you? You're like a sore thumb and stuff like that, and you kind of talk from what I hear from early on to be about, you know, the grey man, isn't it? So blend in, and nothing screams kind of different than being out the ordinary, doesn't it?
Yeah, you know, that's why I always say that tier one, out of all the tier one units in the world, including Delta and also SEAL Team 6, and also some of the other really good The difference is with T2 SES is you can literally pick him up and stick him in any environment and he'll make it work. And what I'll just quickly allude to the fact that, you know, 1 minute I'm on the anti-terrorist team, next minute I'm in Northern Ireland growing your hair long, undercover stuff. Straight back from that, and then you're on green operations out in Bosnia. So it's, you know, totally different environments. But if you can pick an individual up and say, listen, you're off, blah, blah, you're happy with that, and chuck him, and off he goes, and he makes it work, that really is T2 SES. You know, the individuals, they're very adaptable to different environments and just getting on with it. And even though, you know, some of the equipment not be the best or whatever, the guys will make it work. You know, they don't need a Rupert to help. They don't need the best kit. You know, just give them some, and they do. They make it work. And we've seen many an where the Americans have turned up with all the fancy equipment and stuff like that, and we've got absolutely pants. Some of our equipment's been pretty pants, to say the least. But you still make a go of it, and that's really testament to the mentality already, and the selection process of being able to get that individual to be that way orientated.
Yeah, I kind of had a US Marine on. He was a friend of mine, and obviously Marines not tier one, but he was talking about how they have such a large kind of budget for one. You know, and they have such a large pool to draw from. So I suppose they can stick a unit and teach them one thing and use them constantly, because they'll have loads of different units all doing that same thing. Whereas we all know the British Army budget. I know that the SF budget's probably very different, but they kind of, we've got small numbers. The budget's not as big, you know, so you kind of have to rotate around the roles because we haven't got the kind of the personnel, haven't we? You know what I mean?
Yeah, you know, I did a little stint with Delta Force over in America, and then on the way back, because we had all this equipment with us that they issued us, and when we went to hand equipment in, we actually pleaded with them, could we keep this? And good on Delta, there was these big rucksacks and said, keep whatever you want, and you know, it was the old Dana boots and all this sort of stuff. So it's brilliant, you know, coming back with this massive bag. But I always remember Bosnia, when we finished Bosnia, you know, we had about 30 66 kits left, and they you know, don't bring them back, get rid of them. So Billy, ourselves, you know, off we went, and you know, probably fired more 66s than the rest of the British Army in a year.
Yeah.
Just, you know, just a bit of practice, if that makes sense. So yeah, the budget for the army can, yeah, depending on what, you know, if you're SF1, your budget's going to be massive. If you're Green Army down here somewhere, and that's no disrespect to the Green Army, but their budget will be slightly different.
Yeah, and it is. And I was in a time in the Green Army in the, like I say, late 90s, 2000. It was busy-ish, you know, with what was starting to happen, the start of Afghanistan, Macedonia, Sierra Leone. I went to Sierra Leone and obviously Northern Ireland. But I remember being in Afghanistan and patrolling around Kabul in green kit, trousers that people had scrounged because we had no desert kit. They didn't have a budget for it. And then obviously a bit later on, 2005, 2006, when southern Afghanistan started to kick off, the British Army seemed to get a lot of stuff thrown at it. And now that the kit that they have nowadays, it's kind of probably unrecognizable to yourself. It certainly is to me, and obviously your generation as well. You know, you see some of the kit. They've got Altberg boots now that are like incredible. I've scrounged a pair of someone I know in the stores to use as like personal walking boots because they're incredible.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's funny because I've got 3 lads all in the military, and you know, some of the equipment that they're talking about is I know nothing, if that makes sense. It's funny little story. My middle went, he wanted to join the military, and at the time Billy was the sergeant major of B Squadron, He, you know, you want kids to go and do a bit of work experience, and he volunteered. He wanted to join the military, and he ended up joining the paras. But he wanted to go and do the join the military for a day, and there's 20 people there, 20 slots. For some reason, he never got it, even though he was the first one to volunteer. Friends of friends, and so they all, you know, go. Oh, you can go down and work in a garage. And I was just lucky enough that I was back from somewhere, and I said, "Listen, you ain't going to be doing that." So I rang the school up and said, "Cancel that. You're going to be doing it." So I got in touch with Billy and said, "Look, listen, Billy, is there any chance that our lad can come up and join B Squadron?" Bear in mind, he's only what 15, and Billy said, "Yeah, perfect." What it was it was a week later, so all the kids went off to do their thing, and Callum was sat at school on his own, and then all of a sudden he was allowed to go off. So Billy used to come and pick him up in the Range Rover, and drive him down to Pontralis, and we've got him there, you know, pictures of him absent. He was joining the assault teams. Honest, he had an absolute ball. And at the end of 5 days, another good friend of mine was in the storeroom in the stores as the squadron's storeman, if that makes sense. Not storeman, but in charge of it. SUMS. Yeah. And literally loaded up a big bag full of these goodies as to remember his day, like, you know. Anyway, at the midpoint, they were down at Pontralis, and one of the teachers had to come and verify that he was actually doing this training. So Billy, he was a bit gutted because he had to go again in the Range Rover, brought him back, stuck him by the we call it the gap at Pontralis, where all the embassies are and all that sort of stuff. And he said, "Listen, Callum will be along in a minute." And helicopters came in. There's Callum coming down. 15 years of age, work experience, fantastic.
Oh, mate.
Billy did say to the teacher, "Listen, this is, you know, as a favour to a friend of mine, like, you know, but flipping out, how cool for a 15-year-old kid, mate."
That is some work experience. That is absolutely incredible, isn't it? Jesus, I'd take that now. If someone gave me the opportunity now to go down there, I'd be like, "Yep." I'd not be able to do a lot of stuff because I've got that many injuries, but at the same time, I'd still try.
I'll tell you what, I took my hat off to Billy. And the good thing about because Billy said, "Listen, it's options," so they were doing the different options. And he said, really, the timing wise was perfect, because Callum certainly never got bored. Absolutely loved it. Just goes to show, you know, for these young kids, if you want to go and do the army thing, let them all go and do the army thing. Don't try and fob them off with working in a garage. And thankfully, I was about when the school gave them excuse, and I was like, "That not a chance. Is he going to be doing that?" So I'll arrange some up myself. Billy, any chance?
Yeah,
Brilliant.
no, awesome. And that's the networking side of the military in all parts of the military. Is like the networking, and the guys, they look after each other, don't they? It's like, you know, I can only speak for my unit, but I've not seen some of the lads in 20 years, and I can call upon them for a favour and I'll get it, you know, and it's just, and obviously the SF community probably even more so because of the close knitness and the small teams and working together in the environments that you work in, you know. So that's incredible. Yeah, no, fair play. What I was going to touch on, Mick, briefly before we kind of jump forward again, was like the whole selection thing for the kind of what I've done in the past is that my missus critiqued me on the podcast, as she does, and she kind of said to me, she went, "Sometimes you talk about stuff with these military guys that don't, and civilians and your viewers don't understand what they mean." So on this occasion, I was going to say, would you mind just talking through the kind of basics of selection, what selection is, and how long it takes, and the different parts of it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I did 2 selections. I failed the first one, which was quite bizarre because it was in '86, and it was in them days it was a 4-week start point. So 4 weeks later, you then test week itself was week 4. After that, when I went back the second time, it then down to 3 weeks because the first week on selection way back was all about map reading, how to learn how to map read and this, that, and the other. And then quite rightly, they sort of pointed out that actually you should know how to map read before you come on selection. So it just meant they could get rid of a week. Yeah. So when I came back on the second one, I was flying. My fitness was perfect because at the time I was an instructor on the All Arms Commando course, so I was in that to keep my levels of fitness up. So it's a 3 weeks running up and down the hills, culminating really on the test week, 6 days of different marches that eventually get longer, and your weight on your back gets a bit heavier. If that makes sense. And the aim of the game is really to get the start of test week with no ball. And if you can do that, then you give yourself a really good chance of getting through. Because statistics, there's a good chance that you're going to fail selection. That's just part and parcel of it. So I was lucky enough, no injuries, got test week, and away. So at the end of test week, you once you finish that and you get told, endurance, get ready for the next phase. And the next phase is really about 3 weeks down in Sennybridge, getting ready for the jungle. And without a shadow of doubt, jungle by far the hardest part of selection. Now running up and down a hill with a big Bergen probably sounds quite hard. But all they're trying to do is get to a certain number of people who are then capable of now doing what they want to do out in the jungle. But the jungle's a massive learning curve, especially with the weapon drills and stuff. Because as we were alluding to earlier on, the arcs of fire that you're using in the jungle are pretty much non-existent. And you really need to be switched on at all times. Not only for yourself, but also for your oppo that you're working with. And unfortunately, in my jungle phase, we had a fatality, and it wasn't one of the guys who was actually on action. It was a guy who volunteered to be the enemy, and he accidentally shot dead when they did the camp attack. And what it was someone had a live round mixed in with blank ammunition and shot the guy. Yeah, fairly close. So that was a bit of a culture shock. It's a bit of a shock to the system. Going down there to wrap a body up in a sort of a plastic poncho and drag him out, and then. But quite bizarrely, the SIB were in, and they turned up. SIB being the military police, but these 3 guys turned up with suits on, and came out to the jungle, the jungle, and you can imagine the jungle is quite dirty place and muddy and wet and everything. They turned up with their suits, and the section that had gone through with the camp attack, they all had to hand their weapons in because all the weapons had to be then taken away because nobody had actually known who actually fired the weapon, if that makes sense. So off it went. So all these guys were had to carry sticks as opposed to weapons because they didn't have enough weapons. And then a resupply of weapons came in, and then the jungle continued, and that's 6 weeks really. Again, finishing with a quite a hefty final exercise where there's quite a long tab or tab out of the jungle, if that makes sense. And then you get picked up by a helicopter and flown out. So 6 week sort of period in the jungle, the hardest part, bar none. So lost quite a few people. and we were down to about 15 people, 16 people. And then the next phase after that is obviously combat survival, learning all bits and bobs, and then you go on the run with a hunter force, and we had the parachute regiment hunted us down. Yeah, absolutely. So you didn't want to be captured, but ultimately everyone does get captured because they make sure that everybody gets captured. And you get captured, then go through the interrogation phase, and the interrogation phase is 36 hours. White noise, and bizarrely, really bizarrely, we lost 4 people on that phase, and generally you don't lose anybody on that because everybody knows the score. But we had a guy who hyperventilated in his mask, so came off the wall, hyperventilating, so got rid of him. We had a parachute regiment guy who actually got captured, got picked up by the other paras, and for some reason he just thought that because he'd been captured, that would go against him, and so he refused to come back out. It just played on his mind too much. So he went, yeah, absolutely. Good, really good lad as well. Would have made the perfect. We had another guy who didn't like the stress positions. You know, quite uncomfortable. Didn't like it, so put his hand up, and then finally the final one was a classic. So when we came out of the interrogation, you know, the chief instructor stands in front of you and says, "Listen, take your thing off. You recognise who I am? Yeah. Right. You finished now. Yourself a cup of tea." So me and this other lad were chatting away, and we were debriefing ourselves, and we both actually thought we'd failed, because he said to me, "Mick, do you know, how do you think you did?" I think, well, actually, I think I might have failed this. He said, "Why?" Well, when I was in a stress position, somebody put a bit of bread in my hand and said, "Right, eat that quickly." And I snuffled it down as you do, waffled it down my throat, but then made the mistake of saying, "Cheers, mate." And I thought, flipping out, because I said that, I failed. And this lad also thought he failed because he nodded on the questions. And when you nod, obviously, if they're recording it, they can obviously change the.
Yeah, it's an admittance of something, isn't it?
Well, you nodded, yeah. So we thought we'd. Anyway, this other lad turned up and said, "Oh, is that all?" And we went, "Why? What have you said?" And he actually got into conversations with them. Them days when it was the big 4 and the big 4 only. Anyway, he was having a good old life story, but he tried to say, "Well, listen, I didn't tell him anything, you know, untoward." But I mean, this other lad looked at each other, and went, "I think we passed."
Yeah, I've got nothing to worry about.
Funny story. The instructors thought for some reason that I had diarrhea, so no idea why, but they thought so. Every time I got dragged in for interrogation, and there was about 8 interrogations, I got dragged in, and there was always a pint of water on the desk, and I thought it was for everyone. So they would just look at water and say, "Right, drink that really quickly." And as you do, you chuck it down your throat, and away you go, you know. Then you go into interrogation, and I thought they were doing that for everyone, you know. Just that's nice of them. So when we finished at the end, the chief instructor came up and said, "Right, Hawksy, how's your diarrhea?" And I went, "I haven't got diarrhea." Some poor sod that had diarrhea must have been flipping struggling.
Hanging out. Oh, yeah, hanging out.
Yeah, because I was drinking his water.
Yeah. Hey, at least you got a pint of water, didn't you? It's all good.
Yeah, and so at the end of that, it's you then sort of do a 2-week sort of introduction to the anti-terrorist team, and then you go back ready, and then it's you get told you passed, and literally there's no airs and graces. You just sit in the cinema, and Sergeant Major, the RSM chief instructor, and all the instructors in there, and they just throw you your berry. Well done, Oxy. Off you go to B Squadron, and that was it. No fanfare, no fanning about, and that. And it was great. So 4 of us stood up and off we went to the B Squadron. So all told, just short of 6 months, I think it is altogether. And
yeah,
ironically, my eldest son was a few days old when I went on selection. Next time I saw him, he was 6 months old. Brilliant.
wow,
So,
yeah. Well, it's just like you say. It's kind of, yeah. If you're going on it, and there's no kind of room for, well, I've just had a kid, or you come back and it's just part and parcel. And again, that's what it's part of the kind of thing. And what you said there about, I have been to the jungle with the Paras. I went to Belize, but nothing like kind of, you got primary and secondary jungle. I know I have heard. I've never done Brunei. Was it done in Brunei then when you did it back then? Yeah. So Brunei is obviously renowned for being harsh and everything. So is Belize. Similarities. And I've done the jungle lanes. Yeah. Well, someone did say to me that jungle face is basically the hills, but it's hot, wet, and sticky. Things are trying to kill you. So yeah, I can't relate, but I have operated in a jungle. And it's not very nice. So to be put through that on top of it is, and the second part is, I've talked to a few guys about, is like, obviously I think some people that go on selection, or certainly people I've spoke to, it's almost a given that if you get to the E&E phase, you think that you've passed. So do you think maybe elements of people switched off and thought, well, it's a given now, I've passed, I've done the two bits, the hills, the jungle, I've just got this token bit to do, and then get caught out?
Yeah, they do. I must admit, the SAS selection is probably one of the most fairest selection processes you can go, because if you especially jungle first, when you've got a DS, so one of the DS may dislike you, he may think you're a right old numpty, and what they do is they switch you onto another DS, and the DS will either confirm that you're a numpty, or say actually he's actually quite a decent guy, and then sort of you'll pass going through there, because it's a personality clash, and you can't get over that. You will always get, no matter what you do, you'll always get a personality clash. So to nullify that personality clash happening, they'll switch DSs here. So when you do the final exercise, you've got a totally different DS, and he's assessing you on what he sees, not what someone's told him, if that makes sense. So it's and I'll tell you who I got that from was Billy was actually one of the DSs on selection. Not when I went through, obviously, but he alluded to the fact that it was a really fair selection process, if that makes sense. And it is, if you're good enough, you'll get in, regardless of your background. We've had chefs, we've had Navy people turn up, people totally non-teeth arm, parachute regiment or whatever. But as long as when you think of a paratrooper and a Royal Artillery guy, for going in the jungle, the paratrooper is going to be up there somewhat, and the reason being is he's more attuned to fighting, as in infantry work.
Yeah.
They'll give a bit of leeway, if that makes sense. They'll tell the artillery guy, this is what you've got to do. And as long as you don't make mistakes and you just get on with what they're telling you to do, then all of a sudden that imbalance, rights itself, if that makes sense. So you don't have to be, a paratrooper or a Marine to have an advantage. And the hills especially is a fantastic leveler. You've all got to run down them, no matter who you are, you're up and down the same routes. And it's also good that, when I did my selection and the boys are doing their selection now, we can't say, in my day it was a lot harder. No, actually, boys that are going through selection now are probably better trained than what we did in our, because of the different going on. So their learning curve for different is higher. And I know, I always remember going to a reunion in 2015, and the Sergeant Major of B Squadron was just a young lad who just joined Mountain Troop, my old troop, as I was leaving. And so the next time I saw him, 15 years later is Sergeant Major. And bearing in mind that you've got all these guys in the Iranian embassy siege, you then had my era, a lot of Fijians. And this Sergeant Major stood up and said, listen, guys, don't take this the wrong way, but when you went through selection, it's different to what it is now, because now guys are better trained. And we all sort of looked at each other thinking, cheeky bugger, do you know who he's talking to? But actually, it was quite right. It is, and you just got to accept that. We still do the hills. Everybody, no matter who they are, runs up and down them same hills. So all that is still the same, which is a good thing. And like I say, it just nullifies that golden ball saying, yeah, when I did it, it was a lot harder. Actually, it's not. It's just the way it is,
Yeah, I can relate to what you're saying there. From what I've heard, anyway, is like, because years ago, when I obviously kind of again ex-parachute regiment, so I am a little bit biased towards my unit. But we were like, I remember the units being on Spearhead, like the green jackets back then, and yet we'd go. They'd take them off Spearhead and send us, and we'd go. And I always, at the time, I was like, yeah, that will show you. But now I look back and go, well, that was unfair. But maybe it's because we had a bit more experience with the Northern Ireland, or for whatever reason. But what I have heard recently is because of the Afghan tours, starting as early as 2000, 2006, every unit were rotating through there and getting combat experience and getting full hands-on rounds down the range. So that brought the gap down and put it on a level. And now I've recently heard that the percentage, because it used to be kind of heavy power edge, didn't it, for 2-2 for a long time. Maybe because of the fitness levels that we kind of have a little selection process for the paras, but the kind of swing shifted a bit, and a higher percentage up there with the parachute regiment and the Royal Marines were passing selection, like the Mercians and the rifles and stuff. So it's kind of like you said. So potentially it's happened across the board that the soldiers, and not only that as well, the technology has advanced massively, hasn't it? There's a lot more to take on board. Back in and even my day, there wasn't as such mobile phones or internet to the level that it's at now. And with drones and with all that kind of, the night visions come on from the old CWS when I were in. I don't know what it was when you were in, but do you know what I mean? It's come on leaps and bounds, hasn't it?
Similar.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty similar, to be honest, mate, the whole thing. But yeah, no, you're right, because in my day, it was very, very parachute regiment top heavy. But the reason for that was sent more people on selection. So, but the unit that had the highest pass rate per individual when I went through was 9 Squadron Royal Engineers, based down in Aldershot. They'd send about 4 or 5 people on a selection, say 5, and 4 would pass, if that makes sense. And I think it's all to do really with the build up, the beat up. When I went on, there was we had a dogler who was in my room. So there was me, 2 pathfinders, and a dog handler that were in our initial room in Hereford. And the dog handler went on day 1, minute 1, because we had to do a 7-mile run round Pontralis with kit on. Failed it. Now, unfortunately for him, the night before, so this was on a Sunday, the night before, he was actually on guard at the officers' mess with his dog. He then had to hand his kit in, quickly vehicle, and get down to Hereford. Now that is really bad for his unit, for not giving the poor guy plenty of time to prepare, do selection. Whereas the 2 pathfinders themselves had done quite a lot of pre-selection work, if that mate. And bizarrely, all 3 of us that were in there, selection at the end of it, so lost 1 on the first guy first day, and then 3 sort of were there to the very end, if that makes sense. Purely because we had a lot of, and that's why I like 2-9. They never hindered my progress of going down to Hereford. If I wanted to do a bit of training, I would ask them. They would give me a Land Rover, and off I'd go to Bridge, book into one of the camps there, and spend 2 weeks running up and down mountains. If that makes sense, because I think doing your pre-recce, so you know where all the routes are, because most of the routes, just that on the day you just don't know which order you're going to be going at. But most people know the routes beforehand, and if you can do that, and I always, I gauge it really that if you can get off vehicle, and before he even tells you what grid reference you're going to go, you've got a rough idea which way we're running. That tells you that you've done your homework. And it's like most things, if you're going to study for something, homework first. And on SAS Selection, your homework is actually running up and down mountains. And away you go.
Yeah, we had an old saying that it's like time on the hills is seldom wasted, and the lads used to go down on leave and quite rightly what you said there is like we were given, like I never went on selection. One of my biggest regrets in my life, whether that's a different man, probably not. I kind of wish I'd have done it, but it is what it is. But I know guys that went on left, right, and centre, and they spent a lot of time down there going over the routes, and the routes are kind of a bit of a kept guarded secret, but someone had always come up with some routes from somewhere that would be roughly in the right kind of ballpark. And there's only so many routes you can go up and down, and obviously they're kind of well used and stuff like that. But so the guys used to spend a lot of time kind of knowing the routes, which is proper planning, isn't it, as the old saying goes?
It is. But story on our one, one of the DS ex-paratrooper actually. He was, when he took his dogs up there, he had 2 Staffy Bull Terriers, youngsters, young dogs. So he was up, and he was on quite one of the high features in the Brecon Beacons. Anyway, a helicopter had come in to his location, and the 2 dogs pooped their pants and absolutely busted and ran off. And he literally thought he'd lost his dog, so he managed to track one down. And the other one went missing. So as I was coming over one of the other features, this dog was stood on the track, sort of looking a bit lost. And I recognised the dog straight away. And so, as you do, I scooped him up, stuck on the top of my Bergen, and then sort of ran up to the checkpoint where the dog's owner was, if that makes sense. And so dropped the dog off, expecting a nice thank you, and dead. So the instructor completely deadpan. Right, Hawks, your next checkpoint is blah 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 blah. Okay, thanks for that. Thanks for bringing
off you drop. Yeah.
But it was just a bizarre, typical selections, something unusual will come up. And we didn't talk about this until about 2 years ago, when we reminded each other of it, like just turning up with a dog on top of your Bergen. Good job I flipping past. I'd have blamed the dog.
Yeah, the dog's fault. Yeah.
It's the dog. Yeah, absolutely.
No, awesome stuff, Mick. So yeah, obviously you kind of, how long did you spend in the forces altogether? Did you do your full 22?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did 22 years, 14 in the regiment, obviously, 22 altogether, plus the just short years in juniors. So yeah, joined at 16, left at 40. I turned down the opportunity of an extension because the regiment liked to give these 5-year extensions. Turned it down because I just thought at the age of 4 is probably the right age to do another career. Was very lucky to get into corporate security straight away in the gas and oil industry. 2 years ago, when I had a bit of a light bulb moment when I was over in The Hague, which is working for the last 7 years. So came back and wrote a book, Life on the Edge, which was going great because it's not a Bravo 20. It's all about helping people who hit. So it's a slightly different type of SES book, but it was written by we call it initially it was a ghostwriter, but before we then decided she was going to be a co-writer, because she was an Australian left-wing feminist. So the person that you would least expect to write an ex-SAS book. But unfortunately, she died literally. So the book's been suspended animation, I suppose, for the last sort of 6 months because she went through this terrible illness. And then last night, her husband, another writer who knew the original writer, has said, I'll finish it in tribute to the writer, but also to finish the book as well. I didn't want the book going anywhere other than the person that started writing it. So I was happy that until she's up and running back again, then we can, because I didn't want anyone else touching the book, if that makes sense, out of loyalty, really. So this other lady's now, she's going to finish it. So hopefully we'll do that. And we've got 2 chapters to do. The first chapter is going to be a tribute to the original, to Nicole Johnson. And then the final chapter is all to do with Hawks and Co, the little company that me and my daughter do, because we were trying to get into the rural farm industry, because we used to break into farms in Northern Ireland, covert days. So we know every facet about breaking into farms and what to look for and stuff like that. So it's the old poacher to keeper mentality, trying to get. But what we're trying to do with the farm industry is, because the reason why farms get ripped off is because there's no culture there with the farmers or the workers. It's just unheard of. So what we're trying to do is trying to get into the industry and change that culture. And then the other one is me and my daughter. We teach personal safety situation awareness, including breakaway restraint training. But I get my daughter to do that part purely because she relates to all the females and all the kids, and they find it more believable seeing a 25-year-old girl doing it as to an ex-SAS guy. We've done school. We were in Aldershot the other day, actually, teaching 35 teachers, and 3 weeks before we did all the students. Now the students were they were learning difficulty children, so quite vulnerable, but very erratic, because they weren't allowed into mainstream schooling. And I got warned off by the headmistress to unexpected. So my response to that was, if you can teach an SAS squadron, you can teach anybody. So that's really what we're trying to push at the moment. We've got a lot of experience, and what we're trying to do is trying to help people, because unfortunately the world is not going to get any better, and there's always going to be people out there taking advantage of the vulnerable, like farmers, the rural community, kids, a lot of knife crime about. So yeah, we've got good intentions. We just need people that can make a difference to listen to us, and start thinking of people as opposed to themselves, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It sounds like, you're all over it, pal. I mean, it's like I say, it's a difficult one. The rural areas, they're kind of isolated, so it makes it really easy for crime, doesn't it? Because there's less chance of being spotted and stuff. And I suppose that's why it is rife like it is. But at the same time, people that tend to live out with farms tend to be a little bit more wealthy, affluent areas. So you in the flip side, you don't expect it. But it's almost turning a blind eye to it. And it's about making that awareness a from a military perspective as well. Is like always staying, never take your eye off the, keep switched on all the time, so to speak, isn't it?
It is. What we're trying to explain to the, because a lot of the farmers are quite old and bald, so they're very loath to change their habits. So we can get into the agricultural college when their kids are 16, 17, and get that culture embedded, so every security thing they do becomes second nature. Because at the moment, security for them is a chore, and when it becomes, but like military people, everything we do is second nature. so it becomes habitual, and we just do it because, you know, we do it. It's part of our sort of way we do it. If we can get the farmers to start thinking that way, it doesn't become a chore. It just becomes you know, a way of doing it, like, you know. So if we can do that, then we're on the right. We're actually going down in the 7th of June. We're down in Tidworth Camp, of all places, and working with the Rural Crime Unit down there, because we got invited by a crime commissioner for Wiltshire, who actually liked what we're trying to do, because what we're trying to do is the missing link. So you've got the Rural Crime Units doing their patrolling and stuff that they do. You've got CCTV, physical, and all the other security system doing its thing. The weak link will always be the farmers, and to be a bit more security savvy, switched on, and start understanding, you know, not to or insurance. You know, if a tractor goes missing, insurance will pay for that. Actually, you know, try and stop your tractor from going missing in this place.
Yeah.
So we're going to go down there and give a presentation. We've been asked, because we do a lot of confrontation stuff as well. So we've been asked not to mention confrontation, and the reason being is we don't want to tread on the Rural Crime Unit's toes, because their advice to, you know, is always go into your house and lock yourself in. Us, we're slightly different. we're more for, you know, defend yourself. We don't want to step on their toes, quite rightly. So but what they've kindly done is they've given us a booth after the presentation, so that we can put our banners up, and then actually talk to the farmers and explain all about our concept of the confrontation side of it. So that was nice of them. Nice of them to do that, and it was a good, you know, bit of middle ground. Don't mention it on the presentation. However, you know, ask about it. You can talk about it. So good on them.
Yeah, no, brilliant. And the two things there, like you said, it's true. Like getting into them, like the young farmers, because they have like young farmers, almost like cadets, aren't they? Almost like cadet farmers, if you like, young farmers. They kind of, it's like the same in the military. You join at 17, 16, them years in your life, whether you're in the military, whether you're in your university, whether you're a young farmer, you're very influential. 17, I'd probably say to about 24 to 25. So whether you get taught, and I hope you'll agree with me, when you're young, the stuff that you learn in basic training, the stuff that you learn in the military, and that from them young ages, they stick you for life. They're like almost like life skills, aren't they? So if you're doing the same with the young farmers at a young age, it's ingraining it in there from a early age. So that I fully understand where you're coming from that. And obviously the second thing is obviously the crime commissioners invited down, because they'll probably see the fact that it's no secret of the fact that they're understaffed. The police are under budget. So if they can kind of push that side of things, it takes obviously a big kind of load off them, doesn't it?
It does. The thing about the National Farmers Union, they pump a lot of money into the rural crime units. So they're very loath to listen to people like us, outsiders, when they're financially obligated to the rural crime unit. So, and that's the difficulty that we have. So we're very reliant on the rural crime units who are speaking directly to the NFU to sort of get our voice heard, if that makes sense. But it's, you know, as the rural crime units have alluded to, a missing gap, you know, that bit that's missing, which is the farmers themselves. Because, you know, defeating rural crime, the key element is always going to be the human element, you know, the farmer and the farm workers. You know, it's nothing else. And as you pointed out there, the rural crime units have got massive areas to cover. And when you think, so the 10 is the biggest crime unit, rural crime unit, 18 people. Now, when you take the desk swallows out, you know, the staff on the desk, nighttime, if they're going to operate at nighttime, that doesn't, you know, give you many people out actual patrol doing this, that, and the other. And unfortunately, criminals tend to operate the professional criminals that between 1 o'clock in the morning and 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning is the optimum time to do their deeds.
Yeah.
Because there's no one. And if an alarm goes off, no one's going to respond to it. CCTV catches them, doesn't matter. They're all masked up. They'll change the number plates, so the recognition things is not going to affect them. It's actually quite a formidable force that you're trying to deal with. You know, beating rural crime. So, you know, our game is to give people confidence, really, how to do, you know, understand what they're looking for and how they break in, so that they know what the SOPs are for what the criminal for. So if you can understand that, you've got a better idea of dealing with it. But also, if you've got the confidence to do it, then that's a plus side as well, rather than, you know, thinking that you're going to lock yourself away. Because if you're in these rural, and as we saw last week with the shooting up in I think it was, this is a rural area where locking yourself away, calling the police is never going to happen, because the police are not going to respond unless you tell them they've got a shooter or something like that. The is very, very, you know, minimal. So you have to have confidence, really, in your own ability, a bit more self-reliant, and that's what we're trying to do with the kids as well on the streets. Be more self-reliant. Look after yourselves. You know, don't ever think that someone, you know, the police are not on their white chargers coming over to rescue you. You know, that's all fantasy. You just need to be a bit more hardy and a bit more self-reliant, and that's what we're trying to pass across.
Yeah, because a lot of the time as well, you know, if you've got that self-confidence and assertiveness to challenge, I'm not saying you obviously go in, and I'm sure you're the same. You don't, well, probably would from an SAS mentality, and me from a parachute regiment mentality. You go out and see them off, but it's just necessarily about that confrontational part, isn't it? If you challenge them, 9 times out of 10, obviously without putting themselves in danger, we get that, but there is going to be an element of that. But if you're assertive and confident enough to challenge, a lot of the time that will kind of work in your favor, won't it?
Yeah, you know, because we teach active shooter, and we've taught it all over the world, and it all started from the Paris attacks 2015. So we you know, went out. I know the police over here don't like the run hide fights. There's a run hide tell. We don't. We follow the American way of and the reason being is Christchurch in New Zealand, where the guy walked into the mosque and took everybody out. Now, you know, that is a perfect example. I think you're going to end up 6 feet under. So sometimes, and this is what we try to allude to, and there's no nice ways of teaching this, but we teach it because people need to know it, that sometimes you may have to take a life to survive an incident with a knife or with a guy with a gun. Know that beforehand, rather than, because if we, you know, if everybody just did what everybody did in Christchurch, you're all going to get killed. So we're trying to give people options, and our teaching is you never ever tell people this is what you must do, because we are all different. The way we do a confrontation is different. So we just give people options, and it's their personality along with the situation that gets them out of trouble. You know, some people like to run away every time. Some people have got the gift of the gab and can talk the hide of a donkey, as they say. And that's their mechanism of getting themselves out of trouble. And if that works for you, fantastic. You don't need to be a black belt ninja if you've got the gift of the gab. You know, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get people's personalities to come to the fore to say, listen, if that's your personality, that's how it's going to get you. So when we teach active shooter, when the police do their teaching and they call it marauding terrorist attack, it's all geared to a police response. Now, you know, I know that any terrorist incident that's going to happen, or a guy walks in or a sword, it's going to be done and dusted, and people are going to be killed before the police even think about, on scene. So you need that to be a bit more robust and self-preservation, if that makes sense. So rather than nominate, and again, this is what the police do, is they nominate individuals, generally security people that the building, right, you must do that, blah, 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 blah. Nobody knows how they're going to react to gunfire until you've actually been shot at, if that makes sense. And you know that better than anybody else. So to tell someone that when someone's shooting, this is what you got to do, there's a chance that he's actually going to do the opposite and run away, because that's what normal people do. So from to the CEO of a company, they all get sat in a classroom and we all do the same training, and everybody gets given the same options. These are your options. These are the safe havens. If you need to get into if you can't hide, you can't run away, here's your safe haven, try and get in there, blah, blah, blah. But everybody is on the same sheet of music, if that makes sense. So it may be the cleaner that comes to the fore. The cleaner might have worked in Bosnia during the war and knows exactly what it's like to be shot at. And suddenly they're the people, them that become the leaders of a bad situation. Does that make sense? And
yeah, no. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, and that's what we're trying to do, is get everybody, because rank counts for nothing when bullets start getting whizzing around your ear holes. So the higher up in the chain you are, doesn't make you the leader of what's going to happen, because bullets and pens are slightly different. So if everybody gets taught what their reaction should be, then hopefully will come out of that and take the lead on it, if that makes sense. But get everybody to a level.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you say, there is the whole adage that's that you fight or flight, isn't there? And that's kind of ingrained almost into your DNA. Some people choose to face the stuff head on, and there's no right, and some people tend to kind of run away and flight. And it's no hard and fast rule. Like you said, if you're giving people, should give them tools to then perhaps kind of use that quality that they've got, then that can only be a good thing.
Absolutely, mate. Absolutely.
Happy days. Well, Mick, it's been absolutely brilliant. I could talk to you all day. Pal. Like a lot of the kind of the veterans from, the Falklands veterans, the SAS, like the stories and everything else. You're just absolutely brilliant, pal. So, but I'm conscious that I've left you. We've been on here for about an hour and 42 or something like that. So, but no, it's been an absolute pleasure, mate. I'll have a chat with you after I stop the recording briefly. Look, thank you very much for coming on the Old Paratrooper podcast, and I know for a fact my viewers and the people that follow it are going to absolutely love it, mate.
Brilliant. My pleasure, mate, and I'm thoroughly enjoying it, mate. And the kudos to you, mate, because you're a nice and relaxed interviewee or interviewer, if that makes sense. So thank you very much.
Bless you, mate. Thank you very much.